Everyone, and thank you so much for logging in today. Today you're here for a webinar on benchmarking carrier digitalization. I imagine that most people are here because they read the report that we recently put out about this. We're going to be deep diving into that very shortly. First, my name is Ethan Buckman. I run marketing here at Freightos. Just a quick reminder for those of you who haven't necessarily explored the full Freightos ecosystem. Freightos provides a full stack of technology for carriers, logistics providers, and shippers, or BCOs. At the end of the day, what we really do is we manage the flow of rates and prices from carriers through freight forwarders and to shippers, and then back upstream to freight forwarders and carriers. One thing that we've always focused on a lot at Freightos over the past 5 or 6 years is research. We've decided to focus very specifically on freight digitalization. More recently, we've put out a number of large reports that have been very well received on this theme. We've also put out recently a survey on ocean freight volatility. We put out a quarterly logistics technology report that summarizes major tech changes in the logistics space, and it's been getting larger and larger every quarter as more innovation hits the space. We put out a blueprint on freight innovation, a 4x4 blueprint, another webinar on digital freight sales. We put out monthly technology updates, and of course you can access all those at freightos.com/logistics-research. If you haven't read the underlying report about today's webinar, do head there and download it as well. If anybody has any questions, you can always email me at ethan@freightos.com. We're happy to share our research and happy to talk more about it. But on to today specifically. Over the course of the next 35 minutes, we're going to deep dive into how digitization is really changing the ecosystem, specifically focusing this time on carriers. In the past, we focused a little bit more on freight forwarders, but here we're really looking at the lowest common denominator that impacts every single person in the supply chain. We'll talk about the research methodology that we used for the survey. And as we mentioned in the report, it's an open methodology, and it's something that we're very happy to share with anybody on the call so you could run your own benchmarks to see how you compare with the research we've done. Where we will share the results, the best of the breed carriers, what we feel really unifies the people that are ahead of the curve and how they're doing it, a little bit about what's ahead, and then what a lot of people have been asking us since we released the report, how to implement it. And I think one of the most exciting parts about this, the report was very well received, and we had hundreds of people register for this webinar. I think as carrier digitalization really hits mainstream, we're going to expect more interest across the board from the BCOs, from the freight forwarders, and especially from the carriers. A word about who will be speaking today. The main part of the research will be presented by Freightos' CEO, Zvi Schreiber. Zvi is a serial entrepreneur who has been in the logistics space since before Freightos, actually, as an importer. Sold companies to IBM, to GE, but over the past 6 or 7 years, has really built Freightos up into an empire that is changing digital logistics, and we're quite proud of that. Discussing the implementation is Daniel Bataller, who is the VP Operations at WebCargo by Freightos. WebCargo is the business unit that spearheads our digital solutions for logistics providers and carriers. He's run major rollouts of our technology at top-tier logistics providers and carriers, and is going to share a little bit about his insights on how to do that. Just two quick technical notes. If you have a question during the course of the webinar, please feel free to leave it in the Q&A section of Zoom. We'll be sure to get to that at the very end. And after this webinar, we will be sending out a video a video recording if anybody needs to leave in the middle. So without further ado, I'm very happy to present Zvi Schreiber.
Good. Hi, Tribe. We've got a really good attendance today. We've got senior executives from right across the world and right across the industry, from top ocean liners and airlines and forwarders / 3PLs and shippers / BCOs. So really a very good cross-section of the industry. And thank you all for taking an interest in our research. Thank you, Ethan, for the introduction, and thanks to your team who've done the underlying research here. Now, as we look at digitization in the survey that we report today, and in everything we do, we're not at all idealistic about this. We don't think digitization is inherently better. We think digitization serves a purpose. It's about dollars. It's about increasing your top line. It's about reducing your expenses. And we're only interested in practical digitization, which actually has a positive business impact. Three particular areas that we focused on in the survey and in general. Number one, of course, is the customer focus. So in the end, digitization is about how you interact with your own customers. Less about relationships and dinners and golf, more about website and self-service and empowering the customer. So we'll talk about that. Secondly, about connectivity, digital electronic connectivity. So replacing phone calls and faxes and emails, which are humanly intensive, replacing that with digital real-time connections. And then the third thing, of course, is the back office. I mean, this industry has been infamous for having heavy paperwork, heavy staff in the back office, and we're looking how digitization can really make operations more efficient and less costly. So those are the three areas we looked at in the survey and three areas we focus on in general. One very clear conclusion from our research, and I can say both in ocean and in air, is that there's an incredible digital divide. In ocean in particular, I mean, strangely, we found that ocean carriers are a little ahead of airlines in general in digitizing, which is kind of odd because airlines, have the urgency and they have the history of digitizing passengers, and yet they're a little slower than the ocean liners. But both in ocean and in air, we're seeing an incredible divide where there's just a small handful of carriers who in ocean in particular are already doing a lot of online bookings and online quotes. So there's just 2 or 3 carriers who are already using digital channels in a quite substantial way. And then we have other carriers who are not expecting to have any digital capability in the next 2 years. So you've really got this division between carriers who are already starting to be very, very digital and others who are far away from that. We'll get to some details later. So as Ethan mentions, previously we've done quite a lot of research about digitization of freight forwarders, and we've seen some progress there. We saw for the first time in the 2018 survey, we did find that 5 of the top forwarders are doing at least some online sales. So digitization has started with freight forwarders. There are also a handful of small freight forwarders who have very good digital capabilities. And there again, there's a divide where the other 75% are not online, and you call them to get a simple price quote on a major trade lane, air or ocean, and you're waiting 2 to 3 days for a simple price quote, which is human beings are spending money and time to produce those quotes. So there's quite a divide in the forwarders. But what we also realized is that the forwarders are often dependent on the carriers. In the end, the forwarders are typically reselling carriers, and if the carriers can't give instant pricing and instant booking, then in many cases the forwarders cannot offer instant pricing and instant booking. And that drove us in the last few weeks to go back to the carriers and see what's going on with digitization at the carriers. So just before we go in and present the results, we're going to pop up a little survey here, and I'm going to give you a hint, maybe a reference point for the answer. But how many years do you think it will be till the majority of freight shipments are booked online without any human intervention from the service provider? That's obviously it's a very small proportion today, but it's not zero anymore. It is a small proportion today. And how many years do you think till the majority? The reference point that I'd give you, and I don't know exactly how valid this is, but in passenger travel, the first tickets were sold online, if I remember correctly, in 97 or so, and it took 10 years for the majority. And then, in freight forwarding, in shipping, it's been a couple of years since the first one. And then the question is it going to take, if we're going to be like passenger travel, it would take another 7 or 8 years, but maybe the world is more mature now and the digital infrastructure is more mature, maybe it'll be quicker. Maybe on the other hand, this industry is more conservative or more complex, maybe it will take longer. So quite interested to hear if you think it would take sort of more or less than the quicker or less quick. So we've got some results popping in. Appreciate that. They seem to be bunching around 2024 as a median. Is that about right? Yeah, just from a quick eyeballing it, we'll get the results later, but the median answer is 2023, 2024, more or less, which is interesting. So that's about 5 years or so from now. All right, terrific. So thanks for your inputs on that. I just need to get back, get to the next slide. Also, just using the passenger, again, I'm not saying that passenger travel is a perfect analogy, but it does have some commonality. What happened, of course, in passenger travel, and this happened a long time ago, is that airlines created electronic connections to the travel agents and later to the OTAs, the online travel agents. That process started, I often like to quote this, that process started in the 60s already with a company called Sabre. And then later Amadeus, who created a global distribution system from the airlines to the agents. And then the online travel agents came, Priceline, Expedia, Travelocity, and made that available to passengers. And now, we take it for granted that a passenger can go on the website and go to Expedia and see the price from the airline with the Expedia markup, and then they can book and get the seat booked on the plane in real time. So that's already for years. We've had rates going from airlines to travel agents to passengers electronically. We've had bookings going electronically from passengers to travel agents to airlines. And, our thesis is that a similar thing is finally starting to happen in the world of freight, where rates go from carriers to forwarders to shippers. Sometimes they go directly from carriers to shippers, especially in ocean, and bookings go from shippers to forwarders to carriers electronically in real time. That's just starting to happen. And as I said, we've done research previously on the forwarders, and today we're presenting more which of the carriers can give the rates in real time, which of the carriers can receive a booking in real time. I won't dwell on this. I think we all know that millennials are coming into the workforce, and not only millennials, a lot of older people are also adopting the online approach and don't want to speak to you. They want it on their smartphone. And of course, that started with B2C, but now we know it's a big part of B2B. You've got Amazon Business, you've got Uber Freight, you've got any number of examples of businesses who are serving their customers, their business customers online. So that's the mega trend, which across all industries, industries are going online. And of course, it's about customer experience. And as we said before, it's about the back end and the cost. And office costs are a huge factor in this industry. Traditionally, freight forwarders are only handling about a few dozen containers per employee per year, whereas a more automated industry like FedEx is handling thousands of shipments per employee per year. So traditionally, freight forwarders and carriers are doing about 100 times more paperwork per shipment than, let's say, a FedEx or a UPS. So, and you can see a big difference in the profit and loss in the net profit of carriers and forwarders who are more automated in the back office and ones that are less. It's a big factor in the cost and in the profit. And now freight is finally starting to become self-service. This picture is of our own website, Freightos.com. But as I said before, there are forwarders who have sales on their website, like Agility Shipper, Kuehne+Nagel, DHL, etc. And as we'll see soon, there are now carriers who are doing it on their website. So we're just part of a trend which is across the industry. One of the key things which I think not everyone in the industry fully understands, and I want to just spend a little bit of time on it. It was a big part of the survey. We'll get to the survey results in a few minutes. But APIs are really important. APIs, for those who don't know, simply stands for Application Programming Interface. It means computer-to-computer communication. In the past, this industry did have some computer-to-computer communication using EDI, Electronic Data Interchange. So there is some electronic communication in the industry already going back quite some years. EDI, though, it was designed before the internet, so it's a very sort of clumsy technology for today's environment, and it's limited in the types of data that you can send. So APIs are the modern way for computers to talk to each other with using the internet and using rich data. And in other industries, including business-to-business industries, APIs are a big part of how people do business. So Expedia, believe it or not, only 10% of their business comes from people coming to Expedia.com and placing an order, which is the obvious thing that we've all done. 90% is coming through APIs, where they take their offering and offer it electronically to other websites and other systems who book in an automated way. And in freight, you can see where that will happen as well. I mean, a carrier being digital doesn't necessarily mean that someone goes to, Maerskline.com or DeltaCargo.com or any other carrier. It could be, ideally, in fact, you want to be selling freight services at the same time that the import and the export is ordered. So when an ERP system decides to do an import or an export, when a procurement system, when a B2B website, whenever the transaction between the importer and exporter is created, that's where the carriers and forwarders want to be electronically selling their service, not waiting for a human being to come to the website. So the website is the most obvious digitization, the most visible digitization, but the APIs are perhaps the most important digitization, because that way you can get orders at the source. Just to give one example from a neighboring industry, what that looks like. If you go to FedEx.com, you can see a very clear website, and it's the same on UPS and it's the same on Expedia. They've got a developer website where you can see their APIs. You can understand how your computer can talk to FedEx's computer and get rates and place orders. So in other, and FedEx is mostly B2B, other B2B industries have created very open connectivity. And we're still not seeing that in freight. Even the ocean liners and the airlines who have websites, even the ones who have APIs, they don't yet have developer websites where anyone can find their APIs. And that's why Ethan's team had to work hard to discover who actually has APIs, because it's not public. And that's a pity. That's a missed opportunity, where even the people who have digitization are keeping it sort of a little bit secret. And you can see how this works for FedEx, because FedEx make it very easy for other websites or other platforms to connect to them. Then you see the FedEx rate on Amazon.com, checkout, or on Alibaba.com, or wherever it is, and they get orders coming in through their APIs. So that's a very significant part of their revenue. Okay, so that's just a little bit about the importance of APIs, and overall, I think it's been said before, so I won't dwell on it. It's been said many times before, but this industry has to stop worrying so much about keeping its data secret and make it easier actually for customers to find the rates and place orders. We're so worried about confidentiality that we end up shutting off big business opportunities. So without further ado, let me get to the results of the research. This is our digital carrier benchmarking research, and let me say a little bit about the methodology. We're quite transparent about how we did this research, and then say a little bit about some of the highlights of the results. So we defined the methodology, we defined the scorecard, we got third-party analysts to validate everything that we're doing. Then we did the research, which was not easy. So we first looked for publicly available information, and in some cases, some carriers have public websites. Almost no carriers, or if I remember correctly, no carriers had their APIs publicly. Oh, they did? Okay. So if I'm getting this right, there was only one airline, Lufthansa, who actually have their APIs publicly documented. So good shout out to Lufthansa. And that was actually the first airline that we were able to integrate with, because they were open about it. There are other airlines and ocean liners who have APIs, but none of them allow you to just find it, which is a pity and puts this industry way behind other industries, even other B2B industries. But anyway, we worked hard to, we emailed and called where we could all of the sort of top carriers to try to get information, even if it wasn't publicly available. That was our independent research. We scored the carriers as objectively as we could. We gave the carriers an opportunity to comment on the scores. Not everyone responded, but those who did, we took their comments into account, and then analysis and the publication that you saw. Having said all of that, we made big efforts to be fair and open. It could be that we still misrepresented a carrier here and there, and we apologize for that, and we'll make sure that next year we again give everyone a chance to comment and correct anyone who's been underrepresented here. So to be specific, we created a scorecard where each carrier got scored on 3 chapters. and roughly 36 sort of criteria, something like that. So a handful of criteria in each of the chapters. Let me be specific about the 3 chapters. So we have, the first chapter was about EDI and API. So this was whether there's a digital connectivity for getting price quotes. It could be private, could be public, giving bookings, tracking, invoicing. And basically, on each of 6 categories, we gave the carriers 1 point if they had an old-fashioned EDI connection, 2 points if they had a modern API, and 3 points if they had a modern API which was publicly documented on their website, which, as I said, very few people got those 3 points. But that's where the industry should be. Second chapter was about customer experience. That was a little bit easier because this was about what can you find on the website. Can you find schedules? Can you find the public tariff? Can you find your own private tariff? Can you book? Can you, et cetera, et cetera. And again, we had 1 point, between 1 and 3 points, depending how widely this was available. And the third point was actually about whether the company is organized around innovation, whether there's a digital strategy, especially if it's public, whether there's a team in charge of digitization and innovation, whether there's a relationship with the ecosystem of startups. Based on these 3 criteria, we created a scorecard for every carrier. And in fact, you're able to get your scorecard. So if you're a carrier, some of the people on the call are carriers. So if you're one of the carriers being evaluated, feel free to email Ethan. So it's just ethan@freightos.com, ETHAN @freightos.com. And Ethan heads up our marketing and our research, and he'll be more than happy to provide your scorecard. And again, not saying that the scorecard's perfect. So if we misrepresented you, at least we'll try to correct that for next time. So what we're going to do, we're not going to present the scorecard of all the carriers, and we're not looking to, there's a lot of carriers who got, almost 0 digital score. We're not going to mention any of those, but we wanted to take the opportunity to highlight some of the carriers who got a very high score, many of which we have no commercial relationship with. So this is purely, based on research. And I'm going to start with ocean and then switch to air and mention 3 to 4 carriers in each who are clear leaders. In ocean, CMA CGM, who do work with us as it happens, did very well for having an API, which is documented, which covers rates, it covers bookings, and it's available for third-party platforms. In this case, Freightos is a partner where you can actually get CMA CGM rates and binding rates for specific sailings on Freightos. And they also have quite a strong relationship. They've got an incubator, strong relationship with the startup ecosystem. No relationship with us, but a relationship with other startups in the Marseille area. And so, we like the fact, our researchers like the fact that they're engaging a lot with that. Same can be said of Maersk, who've got, I don't think they're available on any third-party platforms, but they do have a robust website where you can get rates, where you can book. They've had a chief digital officer since 2017. They also sponsor an accelerator and an incubator. And we believe, in fact, I saw just today or yesterday a statement from Maersk saying that they're doing quite some volume of bookings on their website now. So I don't have specific numbers, but there was something in the press literally in the last day or two where it sounds like Maersk are now doing a significant proportion of bookings already online, which is great. MSC also making some investments and some digitization efforts. I won't dwell on this. The details are in the report, which most of you have seen. If not, you can download. And I want to make an honorable mention for Hapag-Lloyd. Unfortunately, we didn't get response from them, so we weren't able to fully score their capabilities. But based on my non-confidential discussions with people in the industry and with Hapag-Lloyd, I do get the impression that they are also doing quite some booking volume on their website. So this wasn't fully reflected in the report because we didn't get formal confirmation, but I do believe that they are leaders as well in doing online bookings, which is great. Those were really the four carriers who stood out. And I guess not coincidentally in this case, those are also the four of the top 5 carriers in the world. So now I guess Costco with the merger is also in the top 4. But in ocean, it did seem like the biggest carriers are the ones who are digitizing, which is different, by the way, to freight forwarders, where we often saw some small freight forwarders leading in the digitization. In air, the highest scoring airlines were Air France KLM, who've got APIs. They've got fully dynamic pricing, revenue management. So they really scored very highly in that respect. Delta Cargo, who've got a very beautiful website, a very open website where you can see their digital capabilities for yourself. Lufthansa, who scored very highly for their APIs. They were, as I said, I believe the only airline, or for that matter, the only carrier who actually document their APIs in an open way, which is really a best practice, and allowed us, for example, to integrate to their APIs and start bringing them digital orders from forwarders. And I want to make honorable mention again. There's nothing public which we could access, but based on our knowledge in the industry, IAG, which is British Airways and Iberia and others, are also got a robust digital strategy, which I hope we'll see more of during the year. So I want to make a honorable mention of IAG as well. Even though there's no public details yet to score them on. So that's it. So that's really, the results of the survey. There's a lot more detail in the report. And we hope this is just a beginning. We're really trying to do this in a friendly way. We're not looking to shame anyone who's not digital, but we're looking to give encouragement to the carriers who are digital, some of whom are already seeing business benefits with more revenue and lower costs, some of which are just getting started, but expect to see significant, increase in revenue and decrease in costs over the coming months. All right, good. So I'm going to, in a minute, I'll wrap up and hand over to Daniel. But just to say what's ahead, this year it was really top carriers who had digitization strategies, but we believe that there are going to be smaller carriers who catch up and maybe even become innovators. There are some, threats from the outside. You've got Amazon entering logistics, Alibaba, Cainiao, of course, and Flexport, who are now not just a very well-funded digital forwarder, but they're now also an air carrier, so they're competing with airlines as well. And we believe that these new competitive threats will spur on the digitization efforts here. We're looking to see more, there's very little full digital integration. We really want to see a shipper, a BCO, whose ERP system decides that it's time to do a shipment, and that should be going to the forwarder and the carrier in real time, fully digitally. We're not yet seeing, as we said, the carriers have just started digitization. It's very new. Very few have open APIs, but once they have open APIs, we're going to see, rates going from carriers to forwarders to the shipper ERP systems and bookings coming back, the full stack digitally, just like we see already for years in passenger travel or in small parcel and express. A good example of that would be B2B marketplaces. So if someone, and some carriers have experimented with Alibaba.com, I think still very small volumes, but there is this experimentation where an American importer finds some goods on Alibaba.com from a Chinese supplier and then places the shipping instruction right there and then, without ever having to go to another website right within Alibaba.com. So that's an exciting business model. Still small volumes, but we're going to see a lot more than that. We, of course, making a lot more of the support self-service and automated. There are chatbots which are becoming really quite sophisticated now. So it's starting to become feasible for customer support to also be automated. And like I said, open APIs right now, we only found with one carrier, but in other industries, that's table stakes. I mean, you couldn't possibly be an express carrier and not have open APIs. It would be ridiculous. You'd just lose out on half of the business. And we expect that that's going to be the same in ocean and air carriers in the coming year or two. Very good. So, like I said, there's a big digital divide. You've got just a few carriers who are doing significant bookings online. You've got one carrier who's got open APIs. You've got other carriers who feel like they may be two to 3 years from having any digital strategy. And so, we hope that this survey will help encourage the industry along its road to providing the kind of experience that customers want nowadays. And with that, let me hand over to my colleague Daniel, who's in charge of our implementation and can tell you a little bit about what this looks like in practice to roll out.
This is Ethan. Just one quick word before Daniel kicks in. I do see that we've had a bunch of questions that have come in already. Please feel free to keep the questions coming in the Zoom application, and as soon as we wrap up with Daniel's brief presentation, we'll start responding to them.
Great, thank you very much, Ethan. Hi, Daniel Bataller here. I head up operations for WebCargo by Freightos, which has a suite of products that help forwarders, carriers, and shippers become more digitized. So over the course of the presentation and on the call, we have 3 different profiles. We have carriers, we have logistics providers, and then we have BCOs as well. And I think each of you needs to ask yourselves a different set of questions. So if you're a carrier, I think Zvi mentioned that we're starting to see a large divide between those who are digitizing and those who are being left behind. And so I think as a carrier, you really need to ask yourself, well, now I have the technology available. So am I going to join the pack that's really harnessing that technology and becoming digitized, or am I falling behind? And what can I do about that? And if you're a logistics provider, you really need to say, well, the carriers are starting to digitize, so I can now connect directly with them. And how do I take that technology and actually enhance my offering, become more efficient, and actually provide better value for my customers? And then finally, if you're a BCO, the real question is, with all this technology available, all of a sudden, how do I connect all of that to my own systems, to my inventory management system, to any other system that I might have, so that I can strive to become much more automated and bring the sort of manual touch down to near zero. And I'm just going to break it down by each of those different profiles. So, if you're a carrier, you really, the kind of thing that you're looking to offer is really, to your customers, you just want to offer something that's very sleek, very and online. You want to have a sales portal where they can come in and actually search for rate and book online. And of course, you want to be able to offer APIs, right, to forwarders, to shippers as well, to BCOs. And as Zvi mentioned, that's really not something that's prevalent in the industry right now. If you go to the Freightos website, if you go to the Flexport website, you'll find documented APIs there. But if you go to any carrier other than Lufthansa, as we heard before, that's really not an option. So the other thing that carriers really need to look for and strive for is a way to document their APIs and make those available to their customers. But behind all of that, there's a huge infrastructure of work and technical detail that needs to be addressed. Right, so carriers need to have a system where they can provide instant pricing and booking capabilities to their customers, and they need to provide that pricing in a very automated fashion. So if you look again at the air passenger travel industry, pricing is incredibly dynamic. Right, depending on what day you look at a rate or how many seats are available on the plane. You'll see different fares available, but that's really not such an occurrence in the freight industry. And so really carriers need to try and find a way to tie their pricing to be more dynamic, to be more capacity driven, and certainly more market driven as well. And then with that, really what they'll be able to achieve is much greater back office automation to reduce their costs. And then finally, they need to look for a way to honor the commitments that they've made to their customers, right, through these different commercial structures, and making sure that those commitments, the capacity commitments, are still being honored. Now, if you're a forwarder, And sort of a similar story here, right? So you still need to offer an online experience, an online platform where customers, either customers or prospects, can go online and search for rates and book them. And then, of course, you also need to offer that technology, those APIs, straight into shippers' systems, so you can, excuse me, so you can, you can really help them automate their systems as well. But I think the most important point here and the key differentiator is being able to offer an outstanding customer service. It's no secret that that carriers are starting to encroach a bit on freight forwarder territory, right? And so it's really important for forwarders to be able to offer that that enhanced and very digital and low cost customer service through greater digitization. And the way that they can achieve this is really by concentrating on the carriers that are most willing to digitize and the ones that are most agile. And that way, you can really partner with people that are on the same wavelength as you. And then in terms of the system, you really need to find something that will help you manage all of your buy rates and convert them into different selling tiers, selling prices for your customers. Again, offer some kind of functionality to be able to manage your pricing and booking capabilities, automate your back office, and of course, be able to provide better visibility to both internally and externally. And I think that drives home the point of being able to offer much better customer service, right? An outstanding customer service at a low cost. And then finally, if you're a BCO, I think you're in probably the most prized position right now, right? Because it used to be that technology was far behind where you want it to be, but suddenly it's caught up. And so you now have the power to really force the industry to go as far as you want it to be, right? You can dictate exactly where this should be, where we should be 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And there are really three key points that you want to focus on. The first one is market visibility. So you want to make sure that you have all the insights available when you're going to speak to forwarders and carriers. The second one is that you have good integrations, the forwarders and the carriers are able to provide good integrations with your own systems, as we talked about the inventory management systems and others. And then finally, you want to be able to provide, or you want to be able to see real-time comparisons, right? So look at your rates and be able to compare them to spot rates in the market. And you can see actually a screenshot on the left-hand side of the screen, a screenshot of our marketplace where a shipper is able to see their own rates versus the spot market. Now, one thing I like to stress a lot with different forwarders and carriers that I meet is that this doesn't need to be sort of an all or nothing situation. A lot of big logistics providers go into this and think, well, I have to build this incredible sales portal, and I can't launch it until it's perfect. But ultimately, from our experience working with some of the leading players in the market, you gain a lot more from adopting a much more agile approach, right? And just taking it slowly, experimenting, seeing what the market, how the market reacts to your solution, and being able to very quickly adapt to things that are working and things that are not working. And if you're willing to take that approach, then oftentimes you're able to come out a lot more successful. So again, our recommendation, and my recommendation always to people that begin working with us, is to take a much more, take this approach of rapid sprints rather than sort of a zero-sum game. And just to sum up here, again, what Freightos does. So Freightos offers a suite of different software products to help carriers, freight forwarders, and shippers become more digitized. And as we said earlier, we also help carriers and forwarders share their pricing with shippers, and then shippers really share those bookings upmarket with the forwarders and the carriers. And at the bottom of the screen, you can see some of the customers that are already working with us.